Hi, everyone. This is Susan Billmaier, Dr. Suze with Evenstar Institute. I'm here with Vanessa Beltran, who's teaching our class this spring on nonviolent communication. Hi, Vanessa. How are you today?
Great, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So tell me just a little bit about yourself and who you are and, just about who you are.
Sure. Well, as you said, my name is Vanessa Beltran. I am a proud Latina. I am an immigrant from Mexico and a queer woman. I live in Austin, Texas, where I went to undergrad at the University of Texas at Austin, Hookham, where I trained to be a registered dietitian, which is my first love. I mean, talking to people about food, their culture, and food heritage really is something that I find immense joy in, but with the hope to make a more widespread impact on people's health outcomes and ability to access foods that will nourish their bodies and be coherent with the stories that they grew up with and the foods that are most dear to them and their tradition. I went and did my master's in public health at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, where I really gained tools of public health leadership, of health communication, and of bridging together those areas of direct impact with my clients and the people that I serve, and also policy and the bigger systems at play that really structure the opportunities that people have presented to them and their ability to reach their optimum health. And so now I work at Girls Empowerment Network, which is a nonprofit here in Austin that serves girls 3rd through 12th grade as their mental health policy fellow. And so I am constantly at the Texas legislature trying to give testimony and support bills that will improve the life and the well-being of girls across the state. So
So,
that's
so
me.
you really care about people and their experiences and who they are. The three words that I heard that stood out to me when you were talking about your nutrition background was culture, food, and stories. And it sounds like those three things come together for you in your policy work, perhaps as you represent and get out there and talk to people about what's important to them and hear their voices and then work to create a culture where everyone is included. Would that be correct?
Definitely. And I think that one of the special focuses of my role is to really center the voices of girls of color, because when we look at the girls that we serve, many of them are from Title I schools. Many of them are underrepresented in policy and politics. And so their stories just may not be as visible, or they may not be on the radar of some of these policymakers whose life experiences have been very different from theirs. And so we survey our girls, we bring them together in dialogue through town halls, and whatever it is that I take to the Capitol is a direct reflection of what is impacting their lives and what is most important to their well-being. So that's very important to me.
Yeah. And so with that, you said dialogue between people, and certainly with underrepresented groups and dialogue, something like nonviolent communication would come in very handy with that. So how did you come to your interest in nonviolent communication, and do you use it now in the work that you do?
Sure. So my uh, introduction to nonviolent communication came in a very unexpected setting. um, One that growing up as, a young queer girl in the Catholic Church, I never would have imagined for myself, but I found myself at a progressive leaning church here in Austin called Vox Venier. And at the precipice of a very difficult conversation about empathy and LGBTQ diversity within our community. Um, and for many people who have grown up in a religious context know that this is a highly charged conversation, and making any sort of decision one way or the other for more inclusion or for following some of the more specific and rigid tenets of a denomination, this can be something that alienates different sorts of folks depending on
Absolutely.
where they land.
Absolutely.
Um, Yeah, and recognizing this and knowing that wherever we landed was somewhere that we wanted to get to together, that it wasn't going to be a decision that came from the top down, but a decision that as our community we would make from the bottom up, and needed to be able to be in dialogue amongst ourselves.
About a very difficult topic.
So difficult. Yeah, things that really people protect because it challenges like their entire sense sometimes of, you know, like what is real, what is not real. So it's a very difficult conversation to have.
And I could imagine that there were people who didn't know exactly where they landed in the conversation and had to use the dialogue itself, the process itself, to kind of figure out where they stood, uh, because not everybody is going to be hard and fast on one side or the other. So it's a process of unfolding, right?
Exactly. Because I think that, of course, when this conversation comes up, a lot of people will just, if you're going off of like your gut and your instinct and kind of like these this knowledge and pattern that was ingrained into you that hasn't been questioned before, you don't really have an opportunity to see the other person. And so for me, I mean, one very salient example for me is the first place that I ever came out as a queer person was in my church with my midweek group. And for some of the people in my midweek group, I was the first queer person that they had ever met in like a church context. And I mean, they could see the evidence of God in my life in a number of different ways. And so for them, it was an opportunity to really discuss something that in a more tangible manner than had ever been real to them before.
Yeah.
So knowing how difficult a conversation it would be, our pastoral staff wanted to equip us with tools for dialogue. So we did the Enneagram so that we could understand what our own inclinations were and where we were coming from, as well as how other people responded or sometimes reacted. And then we also did nonviolent communication, so that whenever we were going to come together and try to have these discussions through listening circles and through different like contemplative and meditative practices that we did together, we would have the ability to really see each other, to really engage across all the ways in which we were different from the ways in which we were maybe programmed from our upbringing, and come out to the other side with a new understanding and a new way of seeing and being together.
Respectful listening dialogue with people who potentially disagree in a way that both sides could hear each other, truly hear each other, and just come to a new place regardless, a new place with acceptance and respect.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a journey that took 5 years. It was something that we were committed to doing together as a community. And for me, it's been one of the most rewarding experiences, and just evidence of how we are capable of doing public learning and how we are capable of really changing our minds in the most transformative way. And it was transformative, I think, not just for the people who were able to see me differently and accept me, but also for me, like, understanding their complexity and understanding what they may have been protecting or defending, and how I could speak to those fears rather than judge them for those fears. So for me, it was really transformative as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's great. And so you first were introduced to nonviolent communication in the context of your church with the dialogue of LGBTQ. Can you talk a little bit about how else you have seen nonviolent communication utilized?
Sure. I mean, for me, it was something that I could begin to implement across different, parts of my life. So, for example, I worked as a clinical dietitian at a community health center, and it's like an incredibly constrained environment in terms of resources, right? Like we were really in terms of space and exam rooms and all of these different things. We were all just trying to make room for ourselves and for the patients that we were seeking care. And so I was able to use this framework to make sure that I had what I needed to do my work and to do it sustainably in that medical context. I am able to use it in my personal relationships with my brother, with my partner, with my family, as I come to better understand my own feelings and needs and what I can request so that my life will be full and I feel like there's mutuality. So that's been important to me.
So do both people need to participate specifically in nonviolent communication structure, or can if you and I were talking and I was the only one who understood nonviolent communication, would it still work?
Yeah, so I think that's an excellent question, and that's something actually that I plan to cover in the workshop, because it's not always the case. It was extremely useful, like in my church context, that all of us were trained and all of us had this common language and framework that we could operate off of. But that hasn't been the case. But what I found to be helpful, even if the other person may not be aware of the framework, is that it structured my own thinking and my own way of approaching something that I did perceive as conflict, because it guided my own curiosity and investigation into what I was needing in that moment and how I could make a request to satisfy that need. Because a lot of times what I find is that if we don't have a specific enough request to make that will satisfy our need, then whatever way that we communicate may come out sideways, and people may respond in like their own perceptions of what you may need, which may or may not actually satisfy like what it is that you are asking for in that moment. And so I think that it gives people an opportunity to address what is alive in you and what is actually happening, rather than try to make their own interpretations. And so, for example, in my clinic, what I really needed was a desk where I could chart, and there wasn't any around. And it seems really small, but for me, like coming into that space and not having an area that I could call my own really frustrated me. And I had this need for mutuality and this need for belonging in that setting that really boiled down to this desk, and that I could like conflate to like a lot of other things that I was feeling. But really, if I just had this desk that like I could ask for, I would feel like I was embedded into their system.
Right.
And it took a lot of like digging to find that was really the missing piece, because it could come out sideways in a lot of different ways, like, oh, I need you to include me in this meeting, or I need you to do this so that I will feel like I belong. But it all just really boiled down to a desk that once I figured out what my feelings were, what my needs were, and what they were connected to, I could just ask for what I need in a way that considers the constraints and the possibilities that the other person is facing, and we can come together like to a place where they understand like where it's coming from and very specifically how to satisfy that.
Yeah, I'm laughing internally. No, I'm actually laughing externally. I'm laughing at myself because you said the phrase, it could really come out sideways. And I do that all the time. Like I just say things and it comes out sideways. So now I'm thinking I should probably take this class. So so I might see ya.
Yeah, and it's been helpful across different contexts too. Like this was actually a workshop that I offered at Harvard in the public health leadership conference, because I could recognize that in these quickly changing adaptive environments, having a way to communicate effectively is so important. And it's not something that is optimally covered at like a new employee orientation, or that is a 20-minute module that you can do independently like on a computer. It's something that you have to engage with and really workshop with another person so that you can go through your scenario, you can go through like a dialogue, like, you know, a mock dialogue. And we got extremely good feedback. It was the most popular course of the conference. And I've even used it now in my current work and with some of the girls as they lead town halls and as they facilitate some of these conversations out in the community. We knew that we needed to equip them with tools because they will meet girls who have extremely different life experiences than them and who they may need to seek to understand with curiosity, and also ask for what they need.
I'm just writing that down.
Oh, sure.
All right. Oh, Vanessa, thank you so much. This has been delightful talking to you. Again, this is Vanessa Beltran, who will be teaching the class Nonviolent Communication at Evenstar Institute. So check out the website, evenstarschalice.com/institute for more information. And Vanessa, I look forward to taking your class.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.